Hi, good morning. Hi, Cedric. Hope you're well. You might be muted. I've not set set it up so that externals can talk just at the moment, but we'll probably open that up later on if there are any questions. Yeah, very well, Cedric. Thank you. Yes, morning, Adam. Thank you for joining early. It's always good to know people will turn up. There's nothing worse than doing one of these events to just to your colleagues.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, but the colleagues ask the most awkward questions.
That's true. Yeah.
So we'll give people a few minutes just to drop in, and then we'll get going. As I said, the mics are muted just so we don't get any background noise, and we'll open them up a bit later if questions arise. If you do have questions throughout the event, then just put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll keep an eye on that, and we can tackle those as we go through. Everyone's flooding in now, which is good to see. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's well. It's a beautiful sunny day, clear blue skies in Sheffield. Where's everybody else from? Just drop it in the chat just to say hello. Yeah, Jeremy in Sheffield.
Somebody from sunny Barnsley, come on.
Right, that's very good.
Barnsley. Oh, one of Gibraltar. If it's not sunny in Gibraltar, then I feel sorry for you.
Good morning, everyone.
Almost as sunny as Barnsley.
Almost. Accrington. Yeah, Chris. You're not going to have words with Paul about the FA Cup draw, are you?
Definitely not. No, we'll keep sport and football out of it at this stage.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Just in the same way that as a Sheffield Wednesday fan, I'm keeping quiet about Leeds.
Yes. Yes, that's the local rivalry, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't worry too much about Barnsley.
95th minute, conceded a losing goal last night. 92 at the weekend, 95 last night. It's just, it's not been a good week.
No.
It's a 90-minute game.
Well, yeah, allegedly.
Not anymore.
Right. Okay. So we got a few people joining. We'll keep an eye out for new people coming in, but we can get going. So good morning. Welcome to the AI for Business webinar. This is number 2 in the series, From Theory to Practice, Real-World Applications of Generative AI. We hope you enjoy what you see. Some of you will have seen the first one. Some of you may not have seen. We're running that again later today. And there is still time to sign up if you go to our events page. I know some people on the call have also signed up for that one, so we'll see you in a bit. We are recording this session, so we will share it afterwards. Your mics have automatically been muted, but if you can start your cameras if you do want to appear on screen, but don't worry, we won't take it personally. We'll open the mics up later if you have any questions. We've got a couple of interactive pieces to go through. One at the beginning, one at the end. and we're using a thing called Mentimeter. You might want to scan the QR code with your smartphone if it's available, or you can use a code that I share with you. It's all just basically about getting some insights into your use of AI at the moment. Just a quick introduction to who we are. My name's Stephen Birch. I am marketing manager here at DeeperThanBlue. You will mainly be hearing from Neil, so quick intro from Neil.
Hi, Neil Murphy. I'm a senior business architect here at DeeperThanBlue, background in data analytics and AI.
And we've also got Chris Booker on the call.
Hi, good morning. I'm the commercial director, look after sales and marketing, all things commercial at DeeperThanBlue. Good morning.
Great. So do a quick interactive thing. So as I say, we are using a thing called Mentimeter. So hopefully on screen you'll see a screen, the welcome screen. So what we do, you can go to, in your browser, go to menti.com, which is an external website. You can use this code, well, you can read it. I don't need to read it out to you. That will be at the top of the screen for each slide. We've also got a QR code for your smartphone, and that will appear intermittently as well. So we'll quickly rattle through these questions. What we're doing is sort of, in your personal life, how often do you use AI? Great. Morning, James. I think you've just joined us. We're just going through an interactive session. There's a QR code if you have a smartphone available, or you can use the menti.com website and enter the code that's at the top of the screen. And say it's just a bit of information about where you are with AI at the moment. Next one, which AI platforms do you use in your personal life? Any of them, click any that apply. ChatGPT is always a favourite. It becomes a bit synonymous with AI, I think. But
It is, but it's interesting to see that Copilot and Gemini are also increasing with people.
Yeah, Claude's getting a look in.
Yeah. So we're starting to see some change in terms of adoption, aren't we? Over previous seminars.
Definitely. Right. Next. So what do you use AI for in your personal life? Is it fun, search, writing, idea generation, video or image generation, or something else entirely? Personally, I tend to go for search and writing, really. Idea generation a little bit, and image generation. I've not tried the video yet.
I guess Google are pushing it as well now, aren't they? When you Google anything, you get the AI bit as well. You know, that comes up as well.
So there's a big change. There's a big change coming January, which we'll talk about a bit later on in terms of actual packaging of Google products as well as Microsoft. So we'll bring that in a little bit later.
Interestingly, idea generation is really ramping up. And so in your professional life, how often do you use AI? Yeah, I'm in the several times a day camp. Occasionally. I think that will probably likely change as well in the not too distant future as well. Excellent. And then, has the amount you use AI in the past 6 months, either personally or professionally, changed? Yeah, that's not a surprise. If it decreased, then I think there might be some people who are concerned about where AI is going, but that doesn't appear to be the case. And does your company offer any of the following productivity tools? on a license. So it's not a case of bring your own AI. This is does your organization encourage you to use it and pay for a license? That's, yeah, I guess that's not too much of a surprise. None of the above. It's possibly that people aren't using it. I think companies are still trying to find out where people are making use of AI before they commit.
Yeah, so no surprise that the desktop at Microsoft is resident in some of the corporate accounts and customer accounts, is it?
Yeah.
And it's certainly an initiative I think a lot of organisations have got to get on board with, and they're wrestling with in terms of what AI services and providers that they sign up to.
And so if your organisation is thinking about it, already does, what are the primary reasons for their interest?
That's interesting, isn't it? The dynamics that we're seeing there in terms of, I think everybody understands that these tools can help us get time back and avoid spending time on repetitive tasks. And that seems to be what's coming through. But, you know, driving costs down in the market and the economic situation we all face, both locally in the UK and globally, it's a primary motivation for using these tools.
Actionable insights from data.
And then looking at barriers to the adoption of AI, is there anything in that list that resonates? Why people might not want to adopt AI? Sorry, it's quite a long list. So
it is a big one, that, isn't it? Yeah. Everything got looking though.
Yeah, strategy seems to be a common theme with the previous sessions that we've run in terms of from the top of the organisation in terms of direction,
awareness and understanding.
Yeah, so education,
strategy. Yeah, education, mistrust. Yeah. Okay. Gosh.
So I think those things are aligning. Just for everybody who's joined, they're very similar to what we've seen on previous events. And it's clearly something that needs to be addressed within organisations in terms of direction, tooling, and then coming up with a plan of how to execute.
I think this is all grist to the mill. We're going to be compiling all these stats and helping and sort of probably writing something about this to help.
You're going to get this data out, Stephen.
Yeah. Okay. That's the plan. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to the main event. Neil, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Can you see my screen all right there, Stephen?
Yep. All good.
Okie dokie. Right. So from theory to practice, real world applications of generative AI. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? It's so this is the second one in our series. I know some of you did see the first piece, and as Stephen mentioned, we were repeating some of those things earlier, where we covered quite a lot of the sort of fundamentals and some of the jargon that's involved in that. It's shorter agenda this time, but not going to be any drop-in content. What we're going to do is we're going to cover three key areas around how you might approach your AI implementation, how you might go about identifying decent AI project candidates, and then we're throwing in a few examples, mainly to get you thinking how you're going to get some value from AI within your organization, but also how you want to address the project. So we're not going to revisit a lot of that fundamentals content, but again, I think you've had enough plugs for episode 1, where we did stick through some key terms and we gave you a cheat sheet. So, but
we have done a podcast, haven't we, as well? So we can share that if anybody's interested in the fundamentals of what was in.
Yeah, we can do that as well. Stephen will send that link out afterwards. So that said, this is not a deep dive technical session. We'll show you some content from multiple vendors. 3 actually, but it's not vendor specific. So when we show you an example, it's not to say that it can only be delivered by that vendor. It's just that we found a good clearly communicated example, so we've used that. And again, it's not all sector specific, but we are open to requests. If you've got a specific area, you're working in a specific area, and you want us to call out in the chat or email us afterwards or get in touch, you want to look at something that relates to a specific sector, then by all means get in touch, and we'll consider that for future events. So we've loosely titled a few different approaches to AI implementation. So the first one we've got on here is what we're calling the productivity sprinkler. So you could go out today and you could sign up for Microsoft Copilot for Office 365, for instance, or you could do Google Gemini for Workplace, or you could get a ChatGPT subscription and give that to everybody in the company, right? You could just hand that out and almost see what happens. You're throwing a bit of money around. You're not entirely sure what the use case is, but you could throw it out there, and this is quite attractive. I mean, it really is. I mean, the first reason is that you're immediately doing AI, right? So you probably get the board off your back, who are probably constantly saying, how are you? What are you doing about AI? We need to be all over this. And
they can put it in the annual report as well.
You can put it in the annual report. You're getting on with it, and it is quite a quick way to get started. It's also quite accessible if you're from an organisation that's not really got a strong technical base. It builds on existing tools within Microsoft Office or Workplace if you decided to go down the Google route, or how you decided to do that. So it's a good way of getting started. And that broad deployment model is also quite inclusive. It gets everybody involved. You'll create a lot of internal buzz, and you might even develop some or get some wider media interest, depending on who your delivery partner is. So here's an example, and for the people who say, I do look for every opportunity to get Barnsley into the presentation, and Old Movie's absolutely guilty, but this one's too good to miss. So Barnsley Council, for instance, have distributed Microsoft Copilot and put that out quite widely. I've put the links in for all of the various pieces. There's some Microsoft briefing around this particular use case. What's interesting here is that this is, I think at the time of press, the second largest Copilot deployment in the UK after BP. There might be people on the call who can correct me on that, but I think that's right. But the interesting thing here, where the piece you get on the report, is how Barnsley Council are transforming local social care with AI. Not sure they actually started with the use case. I think it was one of these cases where they put this thing out in quite broadly and identified a whole number of use cases which they were able then to support. But some interesting pieces when you read the briefing around this. This was led by Wendy Popplewell, she's director of core services at the council. So it's not an IT-led solution. It's supported by IT, but not led. And also they invested very heavily in a team of AI champions across the organisation and provided training and support. So they were really prepared for things to fail, but also to make sure that people were supported appropriately. And I think it's a really great use case. The benefits that have come out of this are very strong. And I think also what they've done is looked at where there's been a success and then tried to see how they can replicate that across other parts of the organisation. So it's actually been quite successful. But if you are going to take this kind of approach, you have to be prepared for things to fail and make sure that you are providing the right kind of support. Yeah, I'm a Barnsley Council taxpayer and I endorse this message. I think it's a great use case. So yeah, but go ahead and take more another look at that. But it's a really nice example of that kind of deployment. However, again, it might not all be good news. So this is a report that came out from the back end of last year down in Australia, where the Australian government have deployed to 5,765 users over a 6-month period, and then they've come back with a report talking about how often this was used and whether they've seen the right kind of value from it. And the IT news view of this is generally, obviously, everybody wants a headline. They're focused on this being quite negative. They're saying that quite a lot of people that weren't using it very often, and that actually it doesn't really justify the cost. Yeah, you're always going to get that if you take this kind of approach, right? You can go and give it to everybody. So I think if you are going to adopt this approach, be prepared and set your messaging early that says you might actually be taking those tools back from people if we're not actually seeing any kind of value. make sure you get that story clear, that people are aware of that and they don't feel victimized if that happens later. I'd also say that having worked in Australia in some of the government projects, the press do give everybody a hard time. They like to give the government a good kicking. So any of these kind of stories do kind of get reflected. We're also sharing the link to the actual report that the Australian government put out, and it is really worth the read. There's a lot more detail in there in terms of where they got the value, where they did see the benefit. And I think if you actually look at it from a point of view of trying to learn from that deployment, it's a really good use source. So we will share that and get those things out there. Yeah, there's also another report on here, which again we'll share, which came from Google, and again it's a really nice report. It's talking about again where you can actually get the value from these pieces. You would expect that again it's going to be relatively positive, so a bit more healthy skepticism from the other side here. They're typically talking about organizations that are already using AI, so some of the statements around productivity seem to be a little bit loose. But we'll share that. Have a look. Be careful around some of the language that's been applied, and again, just a little bit of healthy skepticism. But it is an interesting way to approach it. But get your story straight. Make sure that the users involved are aware of the fact that this is not landing and staying. It could be something that you're actually, and also try and get as much value in terms of feedback from where value is actually being generated. Because again, if you're doing the sprinkler approach, you might not necessarily know. So the second approach you might take, and again, apologies for the movie references. The movie references are getting a bit older. Last time it was Pulp Fiction. We're back to the 80s. Next one might be black and white. And I am aware of the people on the call who probably weren't born when this movie came out, but and I do work with some of them. But again, you might have an idea for where AI could be used in your organization, and it could be somewhere really cool, and you might decide to build it and test it and launch it and do the whole field of dreams. If you build it, they will come approach, and hope somebody comes to use it. It's a high risk, high reward approach.
That's certainly not worked for everybody in the past.
It's not worked for everybody in the past. So the trouble is, they might not come. However, of the three approaches that we're taking, this is by far the most fun. All right, you're going to create. It's going to be quite creative. It's going to be innovative. You're going to engage with a lot of people across your business. You'll learn a lot in terms of where the value might come from and where mistakes can be made. You might be regarded as thought leaders across your particular sector or within your business, and you might generate again more buzz and media interest. It's the tech project equivalent of a free bar, I think, is one way of looking at it, and it's again might be hard to justify, but doesn't always make it a bad idea. So if you do get to approach things that way, then a couple of things to bear in mind. Keep the scope tight. Here's an example from a Dutch publishing company who've decided to use AI to translate a limited number of books into English. I think focus on the limited number of books, because there might be a really good reason why nobody's bothered to do this in the past. All right, so push something out there, test the water, see if anybody's really interested in that stuff before you do it. I mean, what you want to focus on is failing fast.
That's the approach, isn't it?
That's it, fail fast. However, it is quite good fun to put this stuff out and test it. And here's a really nice example of somebody who's just done just that.
Here is a quick demo of what happens when David Attenborough narrates your life. On the left, I'm going to start my camera, which every 5 seconds takes a photo from my webcam. On the right, I'm going to start David Attenborough. And now, as I move around,
Here we have a remarkable specimen of Homo sapiens, distinguished by his silver circular spectacles and a mane of tousled curly locks. He is wearing what appears to be a blue fabric covering, which can only be assumed to be part of his mating display. Look closely at the subtle arch of his eyebrow. It's as if he's in the midst of an intricate ritual of curiosity or skepticism. The backdrop suggests a sheltered habitat, possibly a communal feeding area or watering hole. In its natural environment, we observe the sophisticated Homo sapiens engaging in the critical ritual of hydration. This male individual has selected a small cylindrical container, likely filled with life-sustaining H2O, and is tilting it expertly towards his intake orifice. Such grace, such poise.
Now, who doesn't need a bit more David Attenborough in their life? But it's, I think the interesting point of that is, look, the guy's knocked that together with a bit of Python and a few tools. He's done it in a coffee shop. He's put it out there. He's created an example. It's not a bad way to go. It's quite funny as well, and sort of makes the point. But again, if you can put something together quickly, share it, try and see whether it lands well, keep the cost down, you might get to do it more than once.
Yeah. I think there's a place for these kind of video tools, isn't there? I mean, certainly rather than every time needing a big film crew and film set where you do an announcement, there's probably a place where these can be used.
I'm sure somebody with it, yeah.
And use cases. So it's giving people a view of the art of the possible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And they'll get better. They'll get better
quickly.
Without doubt.
Improvise and don't spend too much money. Yeah. That's typically the way to go. So the third approach is we call them friction focus. So again, what you're looking at is you're going to try and identify inefficiencies within your organization, organizational challenges, areas of friction, bottlenecks, systemic issues. Start with the why, identify areas and look for tools and approaches that can help. And AI is probably one of those. I've put the engineering flowchart in there. You might probably all seen this before. Yeah, does it move? Should it move? You can basically fix most things with WD-40 and duct tape. And increasingly, when you read the media, AI, it's the answer to everything, right? You can put those things in and take care of those things. But the advantage of this approach is that, excuse me, I'm trying to get my mouse back. There we go. Yeah, the advantage of this thing is that you can focus on cost and value and engagement. If you're trying to write a business case, this is the way to go, right? If you're going to try and cost justify this stuff up front and make sure things are nailed on. You might start with a smaller splash, which is not always a bad thing. Generally, you're going to try and keep scale and engagement restricted. It's going to be a smaller group. But we like option 3. It fits with our experience of what people are looking for, and it's really based around delivering value from AI rather than it being a vanity technology project, right? You're not just trying to appease the board. What you're trying to do is solve a real problem. But mashups of these things are quite a nice way to go. You might start with a shallow deployment of using your kind of productivity sprinkler approach and getting things out there. You might then identify a specific area that's come from that and then focus on it, a much more targeted deployment using this kind of approach. So what we've tried to do is to then look at identifying use cases. So we've got a model here, just again in terms of a process that you can work through, just to try and identify as a starting point, really, to consider an easy way to interact with you. You could start with AI being an easy way to interact with your data. You could just say, well, if you ask a question, and can it help you clarify what you need and then deliver that information in a format that helps you put that information to use. So what we would say is, don't think of jobs. Don't think of a specific area. I've seen lots of presentations where people say, "Oh yeah, AI is great for service, or it's great for marketing, or it's great for
human resources."
Exactly. Each of them.
They're typically the ones that get mentioned.
They are, but generally, don't think of the whole section. Think about tasks. Don't think about jobs. Think about tasks. Think about specific areas, and then within there, here are the kind of four areas that we think you can look at. So we've got synthesize, optimize, routine, and triage, right? Like a framework. So if you think about the top one, the first one there, synthesize. When you're asked a question or you're presented with a problem, does the resolution of that, how you go about solving that, does that require you to look through large amounts of data from multiple locations in different formats in order to come up with an answer or a plan? All right, so again, another plug for our webinar 1, our boiler engineer example, where effectively the use case here is every February when your boiler breaks, maybe not every February, and the engineer shows up, they're presented with a problem, a code, an error, and whatever else that might require them to look through a whole raft of specification documents in order to say what that code means, what the result is, what part I'm going to need, etc. You can kind of apply that to lots of other tasks in your organization. Where is it with it? In most places, most organizations, you've got a situation where some people just know things. They have tacit knowledge because they've worked there for a long time. They just have the answers to these things.
Yeah.
Can you use AI in order to replicate that? You're not trying to undermine the knowledge of those folks. You're trying to share that out. You're trying to make everybody as productive as some of your best people. And
Neil,
AI can be a nice tool for that.
I was going to say, Neil, that that's something that that was particularly pertinent just before Christmas for me, because our oven broke down and we got we didn't get a fire engine. I don't know if you can hear that. We got the engineer out, and the first thing he asked me was, "Have you got the manual?"
Right.
Took me 20 minutes to try and find it, but
Yeah.
if this information had been to hand, it'd have been straight in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're not trying to make the point that, look, AI is great for people who are fixing things or in that position. It's more around for that synthesis piece. Are you solving problems by having access to lots of different information, which you couldn't possibly be in a position to keep in your head at any one time?
I think what's interesting is going back to the previous point around the sort methodology. If you look at a lot of the use cases that I talked about, we mentioned earlier, sales, marketing, human resource, IT, predominantly white collar focus for AI deployment or putting it to work. What we're showing here are examples of where in blue collar situations, this is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, and
to assist people in their daily tasks.
And a lot of that, I think, comes from the fact that a lot of the starting use cases have been assumed to, right, you're going to be working at the desktop, you need the desktop tools.
Absolutely.
But actually interacting with these things, as you see increasingly now with things like Gemini and Copilot, can be done on your mobile phone, can be done using a series of...
We're untether people, aren't we? And we're going to demonstrate that even more a little bit later, aren't we?
Well, we've got some examples in this presentation of people using that.
So the one you just saw on the boilers is an interesting one. It's it came from a client who had a similar use case, who is in the production of consumer goods, items that we consume every day in our daily lives in terms of eating.
Yeah.
But
but that was webinar one, and we were plugging that earlier.
It was absolutely
right. So that's, you can tune in this afternoon for more details on that. So this again is just extending that piece. This is properly white collar here, isn't it? This is a group of people who, and again, there's a link to this at the bottom there if you want to go and drill into this in more detail. But this is people that are writing massive documents that relate to it's contract management lawyers basically. So some of these huge documents that are being created where lots of compliance is required. So the tools can help with the drafting and the review, but also to make sure certain mandatory content is in place. Another example of this is in things like audit. So if you're working in audit and you're working to a deadline, you might be in a situation where it's continually drafting additional content right up to that last point, and people are making changes right at the last minute. You don't want to be going back and revisiting 98% of the document with 2 hours to go. You want to make sure that you're just focused on this. And again, AI can be a really nice way of driving those kind of processes. So again, about that synthesis piece in collating information. Got another example here, which again, slight trigger warning on this one. This contains details of lawyers looking happy. And I know, it's not good. It's difficult to deal with. It's also shameless propaganda. So it's quite shiny. It comes from IBM, but again, a really nice example of this. And again, we're providing links to this at the bottom if you want to go and drill into this in further detail.
Well, sounds like working.
Start to experiment with AI solutions with Watson. What we're focusing on.
Sorry, the sound's not working?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It was fine. It just took a while to catch up.
Lawyers are beginning to embrace technology as a way to become more efficient, particularly in the process volume layer of work.
we started to experiment with AI solutions with Watson. What we're focusing on first is taking a lawsuit, answering it, and then preparing targeted written discovery. That entire process is about 8 hours of work, and we're now able to deliver that in 2 minutes. And our clients are basically experiencing about a 60 to 80% savings of time on this phase of work alone. Watson delivered way beyond our expectations about what it's able to parse in terms of information. And so it was a really easy sell for our organization, top to bottom, deploying Watson as the AI solution for our platform. There's other AI platforms out there, but what Watson does provide us is an ability to our user interface that's really easy for lawyers to use. When we first saw the results that Watson was producing, my jaw dropped because it was able to make distinctions in legal text that lawyers make. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to liberate lawyers from the mundane tasks so that ironically they can be more human, to work on the type of stuff that they really wanted to do as lawyers, the human interaction, the interviewing, the investigations, polishing of written briefs, the research, the things that make them happy being a lawyer. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take that volume process layer out of the equation by automating that so that we can elevate everyone in the industry. I think what's exciting for me is that we're barely scratching the surface on what we can do with AI and machine learning.
So
Who would have thought that?
yeah, so there you go.
Making lawyers more human.
Making lawyers more human. If you think you're having a bad day, that's that guy's job.
I think what's interesting about that, Neil, is organisations can try and resist this move that we're seeing with AI, but taking or making people 60 to 80% more productive is going to make organisations either more competitive, or for those that don't adopt, they're going to start to struggle in the markets that they compete in.
Well, I think the key takeaway from that is you've gone from 8 hours to 2 minutes. That's a real headline. So if you consider areas of your organisation or operation where you're sifting through mountains of information to get to the relevant stuff, then that's going to be really quite attractive, right? So if again, you also might be in a situation where you've got key individuals who just know stuff. Because they've done that years, they've been experts in certain areas and they know where things are, and you're not looking to devalue that, but you want to share that, you want to get that out there. But yeah, I mean, that guy's job is making lawyers more human. That's an interesting challenge. So that's the sort of synthesis piece. The next piece of our SORT model is about optimize. And when we say optimize, what you're looking to do here is to get the most from key resources. So either primarily by deflecting unnecessary work away from them, things that they shouldn't be wasting their time on, or by speeding up the work that they do. So this is an example from Puma. Again, heavy Google promotion. I think it makes a nice example about how you can speed up the creative and skill process. And so let's take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Andrea Durmovic, Senior Manager, Global E-Commerce Photography at Puma, where sports meets creative expression. We are using Google AI to customize the product photos on our website to save time and ensure they are locally relevant for our customers. Google Cloud's Imagine is helping our global content team create dynamic product imagery. And here's how. Let's say a new trail running shoe just launched on our site. I only need to click on the Apply AI Background button. Then, based on my prompt, a variety of sample images are generated for me to choose from. Nice. These all capture every detail I included in my prompt, together with the shoe from our photo library. Let's choose this one. We also look to Imagine to help us easily customize content for regional markets. Let's say these shoes are also launching in Japan. I can localize this image by going back and editing the prompt to include a recognizable landmark, Mount Fuji, for example. Ultimately, this makes for a better digital shopping experience for our customers. Puma India, for example, has already seen a 10% increase in our click-through rate. Imagine is cost-effective, creates high quality and localized visuals at scale, so it's been the perfect choice for us.
So yeah, look at that 10% increase in click-through. and the quality of the quality of the output is improved. So
we have a couple of clients on the call who are in e-commerce.
Right.
So this is quite huge in terms of anybody who's been involved in terms of pre-production of assets imagery to obviously improve an e-commerce proposition. This is absolutely game changing for organisations, as we saw there with Puma.
Well, a nice example there. You can adapt the content much more quickly. You can kick off that creative process again, and probably put some real guidelines around what good looks like, so that you can keep that churn quickly. And again, I mean, that Puma's a good example. I'd imagine they've got new products coming out daily almost, so it's a really a great tool. But you're getting it from both sides there. You've got, for a business case, you've got cost avoidance in terms of making the team bigger in order to provide that, but you've also got improved revenue because you're making better and more engaging content. So it's
time to market. Time to market in terms of cutting that down and reducing pre-press costs in terms of photography.
Again, optimize. Again, another example here. This is more about boots on the ground. This, again, another plug for webinar one, in case we can get to see the whole thing here. But what we use here is a system for, I mean, this is actually a policing example, but it really applies to anybody who's looking to fill shifts or manage staff rotas at short notice, and give you a better idea of removing some of the admin that takes place and the real headache in dealing with sort of low-level questions that drain key resources time. So this is something where, again, you're looking at an example where there's been an event, there's been an incident, you're trying to get a lot of people to attend to those things. There'd typically be a coordinator sitting at the center of this kind of activity, trying to get a number of people with the right skills to the right place at the right time. And this is something that was previously done manually or done by hand almost, and a series of text messages. And you can replace that with an AI-driven assistant that can actually manage the process for you. So the first part we're seeing here, and again, we go through the whole thing in the webinar one piece if you want to go back and see that. But I think Stephen might have shared the videos across this as well before. But what you're looking at the moment is sharing the time of the central coordinator who's actually managing this process. But then towards the second half of this, and I'm going to skip forward actually, if I can find my mouse again, I'm going to skip forward to about here, around what you actually see at the other end when this lands on the desktop. Why is that not jumping?
You clicked into there.
There we go. Okay, so this is what you see at the other end. Staff on the ground, in this case it's police officers, get a clear message, they can respond to that. You're not dealing with a human at the other end, which means that you can deal with 3,000 or 4,000 people at the same time. You can coordinate these kind of responses. The quality of information that you end up with at the end of this is something that's immediately actionable, and it just streamlines the whole process. Anything where you're dealing with large numbers of members of the public in real time, but you've only got a bottleneck of people who can handle those things. It's a really nice way to approach this. So again, it's a bit of a leap of faith, but there'll be tasks, there'll be jobs within your organization where this kind of approach would apply.
So rostering staff is typically, which is what this one is, right? In terms of getting people to an event, an incident in this case.
In this case, but equally, we're working with a company working in hospitality. Somebody phones in sick, I need to clear a shift. I need somebody who can run the bar, work the fryer.
Absolutely.
Operate this particular piece of machinery.
Yes.
I need them for
based on skills then. So it's not just a dumb request, is it? It's an intelligent request to the people with the skills that you need to come on station.
But you can imagine you've got somebody centrally wants to send out that question to 100 people, but they don't want to deal with 100 text messages coming back the other way.
And we've seen this in action, haven't we? Where it's a very manual labour. I think the interesting thing with this one, Neil, is that we're crossing channels, aren't we? We're not asking people to work with a web-based chat interface. We're going out over SMS or WhatsApp, or we can even go through voice.
There's nothing to deploy on the desktop effectively. You're using AI to manage the process, but not necessarily forcing people to interact with an AI tool. So you're not saying you have to give everybody a co-pilot, or you have to give everybody what's an assistant.
No.
You're effectively saying we can run this via your mobile phone or some other mechanism.
Yeah,
but it's still AI under the covers, right? Yeah. We can get that out. This is a really nice example. Again, I've not put the video in here because it's actually one of these things where there's an interaction and it's worthwhile going on. So I've put the link in there. The guy in the picture here is Professor Andy Hardy, who I owe an apology to because he doesn't look this scary in the rest of the video. Right, he looks pretty mean in this one, but I needed to catch it where it said University of Hollywood. I just needed the subtitle on there. So unfortunately, he's looking a bit hostile, but.
It's definitely not.
He's not. And actually, what he covers up is some really interesting use cases here. A couple of things. The first thing that he talks about is the whole problem you've got in the NHS with DNAs, do not attends. It's a huge problem. In this trust particular, they get 100,000 no-shows a year, which is either people just not showing up with no notice, but actually a big problem is a lot of people cancel within 48 hours of an appointment. And that means you can't reschedule that slot and it's lost. But by automating this, and some of it, again, back to our last example, is relatively simple technology where they automate text messaging so that they have several reminders from 14 days out. And as a result, they're getting fewer do not attends. And they're able to fill those slots if people are not. Now, that on its own isn't really AI. It can use an assistant to actually drive those things and manage those interactions so that it's not just a broadcast. But the further point is that what they're finding is that some of the operational teams inside the hospital there, 30% of the calls that they were getting were by members of the public who had sent in a request for a referral or received a request from had been told by their GP that they had been referred, and they're just calling up to make sure they're in the queue. They're phoning up to say, have you got my request? When I'm coming in, I've had this thing from doctor. What time am I in? And what they're able to do there is basically, as soon as those referrals go out, ping those people to say, look, we've got your request, hold tight, we're on this, and we'll get back to you. So they've seen a real reduction just in terms of managing that. The other example they put in, and we mentioned HR before, is it's a really nice HR use case around routine requests. So they put something out called People Assist. They've got hundreds of conversations that are being held on this thing, and they're all about car parking, pensions, annual leave, where I get this policy from, what mandatory training do I need? And you can imagine that applies to kind of most businesses, really. They've had lots of people accessing out of hours that wouldn't previously been able to do that. And they reckon the number that they quote in says they've said 2,080 working days per year across operations and HR. I'd like to see the maths, but it does sound impressive. And it's quite an interesting case. But again, you're getting value, not necessarily where you'd immediately look for it.
Well, we know also in that HR space, IBM as a case study as being customer zero for itself. That's achieving 85 to 90% deflection in HR requests.
Right. And
so that's huge.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win because who wants to talk to HR?
Not unless you can help it.
Exactly. Right. So again, another example here on routine. This is a nice piece around AI in recruitment. It's using the ability to support multiple languages and do translations in real time. So again, your time savings and various other things are based on being able to distribute some of these tasks, but also to support its sources. Have a look at this.
Right there. As a non-native English speaker, AI is really helping me to be able to communicate with clients, candidates, and tenants in different languages. I'm going to write the job ads for production worker. I'm going to take the notes. I'm going to paste them into the AI assistant, and I want this to be output in multiple languages: English, German, French, Italian. Gemini AI has really taken over the task, shortening the time that's needed to actually write job ads. You want to reach the best talent pool and make sure that it speaks to the right candidates. I can speak to my colleagues in one language, and Gemini automatically translates. So wat vinden jullie van deze kandidaat? Harry Smith. Ziet eruit als een interessante kandidaat. Ik ben wel ook benieuwd naar zijn beschikbaarheid. Ik ben een super.
It's a really nice use case. Apology, I just popped a sweet in my mouth. suffering with a bit of cold here. I thought I was going to cough. So the really nice use case, again, in terms of just that ability to go from one language to another, so you don't necessarily have to replicate everything in different locations. Might not necessarily be applicable, but again, just the ability to take that speech as an input and translate that immediately and put those things across. There's some really nice use cases out there, again, in terms of healthcare, where people are using AI tools now in order to record interactions with patients and to transcribe that. Two things. First of all, you've got a really nice, accurate record of everything that happened within those things and make sure things are followed up. But also it means that in terms of that one-to-one engagement, the patient gets a better experience. There's nothing worse when you go and see the doctor and they're sitting there typing the whole time, aren't they? They're writing down your
absolutely, yeah.
All of this. Yeah. Well, you can actually get around a lot of those things, and there are lots of other use cases where it's a customer service type environment where you're giving people a better customer example. There's another use case here which I'll show you. I'm actually going to just scroll onto this one again because I think this is yeah. Let me get to about a minute in this one, about 30 seconds. Okay, let me just pause that. So this is another piece. The reality is going to be much more often it's going to be a lot more process bound, and this approach is maybe a bit more typical. This is a demo using IBM Orchestrate. It's part of their Watson suite. It uses a series of skills to create a job requisition and asking questions and looking for standard descriptions. But what's interesting about this, and have a look at it when it's playing through, is how you're hooking into enterprise systems and the AI tools are acting as the integration glue almost. So that you can, the use case here is create the job description, go ahead and take that from one system and then post it out on LinkedIn. So let me just play this. Okay, so what's happening here is there's no music on this, so I get to speak over it. So you're creating a job request. What is it you want to do? Again, it's natural language. I want to create a job requisition. I need some details. Right, an existing job requisition. These are the analysts. These are the locations. Take that content and then go and populate this kind of thing. We're going to put this from. It's going to be an SAP job requisition. So it's hooking into that system. Here's a job requisition format from a previous example. We're going to use that. Okay, go ahead and continue. And straight away, it's come up with the standard job description, which you can then edit. You can make appropriate amendments to, and then get it out there and post it on LinkedIn. And you can imagine that would have previously been quite a long-winded approach. What's interesting on the second part of this, so there you go, 2 minutes and it's out. I want to put this on Indeed. Right, okay, well, we haven't done Indeed before, so how am I going to go about this? So it's now you're going to create a new skill. So you've got to be able to go out and find this from somewhere else. Well, actually, if you've got an existing tool, so they've got the robotic process automation piece here, we can pull in that requesting from another tool. And there are hooks into lots of other different tools. You've already got them. So effectively, we're saying, no need to start from scratch here. We're going to build this. Here are the terms and expressions that next time you request it, we'll be looking for. And again, it's able then to create that skill so that next time around, you'll just say, publish this on Indeed, and away it'll go and push that out. So quite a nice way to go. And there's actually been quite a lot of advancement in some of the other providers now around the use of agents and the use of these additional tools to sort of push it. It's a bit of an arms race. So this is the IBM piece where they're, the orchestrate bit. In Microsoft, you've got the Copilot Studio stuff where you can do those kind of things. ChatGPT, they're talking about additional tasks pieces now where you can go out and you can automate.
Yeah, there's pieces in there. I think the aging tip piece is another level on another topic in sessions for us. Yeah, we're starting to see that where tasks are being strung together. Yeah. And we've got automation, next level automation of these things using AI technology, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, in terms of the next pieces of this, you're then able to hook back in, and Watson can go away and hook you up with lots of additional, so organize the interviews for you, organize those additional components.
So lots of connectors being built for different applications. So like the Indeed example, it used the bot through RPA, but
Yeah.
as we step forward in the future, expect that connector to be there almost out of the box in most providers is the direction of travel.
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways from that bit, when we talked about repetitive, we didn't want to, I wanted to be sure that, you know, people weren't thinking, well, it has to be the same thing all the time, you know, because then again, you know, it's not just cookie cutter.
No.
It's the same task, but it is, you are able to do maybe 80-20. So 80% of the work can be picked up by AI. You can still tweak that and you can push those things out, which again, when you're trying to identify the tasks within your organization that may be in a good AI fit, just bear that in mind. It doesn't have to be a great. Now, the last category we've got, the T, is triage. So you'll see some similarity here with the synthesis piece where we started. But imagine you've got a process that's running with fast changing data and you need to make an immediate decision, or in this case, you're generating something current and contextual. So here's another example I'm going to show you here again. So it's I guess synthesis in terms of you using some static information to always come up with the same answer. Here, where we're doing triage, it's make a quick action, you know, work on based on current data and put something in place. But this is it's a US example based on pods. Again, more shameless propaganda.
Since 1998, the pods container has been more than just a moving and storage container. It's been a roving billboard for our brand.
Using Google Cloud AI, we made the world's smartest billboard. An activation that could adapt to each neighborhood in New York City, changing in real time based on data. First, we trained our Gemini model, Vertex AI. We uploaded project plans, brand guidelines, videos, even transcripts of talks with pods leaders. Then we asked Gemini to write unique headlines for each neighborhood. And using Google Cloud, we brought in real-time information like time, weather, subway delays, and traffic conditions.
The result, a dynamic billboard that actually feels like it's part of the city. The truck hit all 299 neighborhoods in just 29 hours, creating more than 6,000 headlines, a feat that would have been humanly impossible without AI. And it worked. In just a week, we saw a 60% increase in website visits and 33% more quote requests, our biggest year-over-year growth ever. With Google Cloud and Gemini, Pods discovered the new way to create hyperlocal marketing.
There you go. Hyperlocal marketing. So it's an interesting use case. I mean,
a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It's clever though. I guess, you know, you're driving a truck around, they're picking up local information in real time. But what's also they touched upon there to start with, they've trained up the model with pods-like content. So they've got the language and the voice correct. So the kind of thing that gets generated it sounds like it's coming from them, and it's that kind of approach. And again, it relates to that current look at. It's a bit of an edge case, but it shows you some of the possibilities. You know, some of the things that can be used. Another example we've got here, which is again is a bit more mainstream. This is from a company called Priceline. They promote themselves in the US as travel deal makers, and we're more familiar with Booking.com and Kayak.
Yeah.
These are the folks that own that. So again, it's a similar kind of thing. They talk about it taking 16 hours to plan a trip, which I think is a bit of an understatement. But you know, but again, it's fast moving, time critical. You've got travel information, flight schedules, weather, ticket availability, price, all of that stuff's changing constantly. So again, you know, it's a triage type of activity, but you're putting that in the hands of the user. So again, a nice way to think about this might be that, you know, whether we can push this out and add additional capabilities. So
in AI, we now also have content enrichment and a real-time recommendation engine using the GenAI services that Google offers. Now, competitive industry like travel, speed to market is very key. So we were very fast to make sure that we had our initial prototype of our GenAI solution built in. We leaned on Google Cloud to bring in the modernized data platform and the AI infrastructure. And it was easy for us to power this prototype because we had our data platform already sitting in BigQuery. It was easy to integrate that with Vertex AI to deploy and manage models. All of our product releases and product roadmap integrates GenAI in its vision, from how we engage with the customers to help them search the book. We integrate unstructured data into our GCS layer, and with Big Lake, we are able to query them seamlessly and join them with image or videos and audio data sets and provide an integrated analytics layer, which will provide us insights into how we want to personalize the recommendations for our customers and give them a more interlinked experience on recommendations. Since our entire data suite was in BigQuery, the seamless integration that Google provides with Vertex AI was one of the key reasons. And also the ease or the development and deployment and management of the AI confidence in the models that Vertex AI provides. So it's been a pretty fabulous journey. Priceline is creating a new way to minimize planning and maximize footprint.
So I think the main takeaway here is you complement your existing services with AI capability. And also what's really interesting there is the call it out. Our data is already sitting in BigQuery. So where's your data? Because that's going to influence your vendor selection. And then also what's interesting with this use case is they're not really talking about going away and generating a whole raft of new AI tools. They're talking about leveraging ones that are available from the vendor.
Yes.
Which means they can quickly get things out, quickly make changes and put those prototypes out, very, very quickly in order to see whether or not they're getting any additional traction from them.
I think you're making an interesting point there, and an important point in that people will look to leverage AI from where the data lives.
Yeah.
So in this presentation, we've talked about, a number of vendors, haven't we? We showed Vertex as an example there, which is Google's AI platform. We've showed IBM Watson, which is IBM's platform for AI. We've showed Microsoft Copilot and Microsoft Azure / OpenAI.
Yeah.
As we've gone through here, which is obviously, from OpenAI as a platform. So where data lives will start to influence to some degree AI tool selection. But expect to see, I think, is another aspect within an organization, multiple AI tools and vendors being used. It won't be one will fit all use cases and requirements, will it?
No. And I think also from that, you might start with one set of tools. So you might, for instance, because you're a Copilot site, you might quickly get access to that. You might then identify a specific use case which is quite niche and doesn't actually require you to give it to everybody, get that license to, you don't have to spend $30 a month for everybody, you know, to do that. Yeah. And you might then select a different vendor. So it might, you might start in one place because it's a really good use case, and obviously it's working for these guys.
Well,
with different ways.
We went to the example of Barnsley in the Australian government with Copilot, where we said ticking a box, Copilot can employ Gemini for workspace. It can be rolled out quickly, but that's not always the best strategy. That was the point, wasn't it?
No, but there are good reasons for doing that. Yeah. We weren't trying to diss it. It's a good reasons for doing that. But again, what you might find is you throw this out, you do your sprinkler model, you find a specific use case, and then what you do is you're going to go, right, we're going to do friction reduction now, whereas we're going to go and target one specific area, and you might use different tools in order to do that.
And you'll find champions in the organisation that will take these things on, right?
You will, and also bearing in mind, what we said about you don't necessarily have to be using the desktop client in order to interact with these services. You can have multiple. You can have different tools for different use cases. However those things fit. Again, this is something we talked about in the previous. I'm not going to go and play this one again. This is something from webinar 1, which we talked about, which was e-commerce. If you're using AI, you can drive additional capability into services that are already in place. That what Priceline we're doing there could equally apply to other e-commerce type solutions. So can you provide advice to customers around what particular products they need, or can you overlay additional capability if people are accessing this through the phone that are coming through additional vendor tools to improve your offering, right? You're making additional, or maybe you're just making additional markets more accessible because you're able to do all that translation stuff that we've seen.
So this was a proof of concept that we did for Howarth Timber and Building Supplies. And this was about putting the best expertise of individuals in that category. So in this particular case, paving. Yeah. And making sure the quality of experience for users was at the highest level it possibly could. Yeah. And likewise, this could be put in branch or in store. So we've all had that Curry's experience where occasionally you find the expert and you get an absolute fabulous experience, but equally you ask somebody about a particular product, TVs, for example, and they don't know anything about that range of products, because they're just floor space managing at that particular time.
Yeah, it's generally around, again, if you're already doing e-commerce, whether you can add additional AI capabilities in order to improve the services that people are seeing. So that's our SORT model. Synthesis, synthesize, optimize, routine, triage. We've given you a few examples. Hopefully that has helped to sort of bring that to life. In terms of next steps, do you want to go through this bit?
Yeah. So obviously we've taken you through a number of use cases today. And I think the important thing from that, as Neil said and I've discussed, is this isn't just aimed at people from a white collar perspective, in offices. It's also out on the road, in the field, where AI can assist. And we are proponents of assisting. So the message from us is not about replacing people. It's about assisting them and making them more efficient in their daily jobs, removing repetition. So there's a couple of points from us in terms of things to assist you moving forward. Obviously, Steve will share this webinar recording, but we do have a cheat sheet in terms of how to get started and some foundational information about AI, and that's something you can download. Steve will provide the link to that in the follow-up email from the event. We will be looking to put in the diary webinar 3. Webinar 3 will move from, let's call it education and learning, to let's get started. That's where our thinking is at the moment. And that let's get started might be with tools like Copilot, so Microsoft Copilot and Copilot Studio. It will be around Gemini for Workspace and Gemini on Vertex. It'll be around IBM technologies as well in terms of Watson X. So we will be changing gear of how do we get this into your organizations and help you become more efficient. We will be looking at some promotions in that particular space. So one that you can expect to see from us will be around Copilot, Get Started. It'll be a combination of a bundle of, say, 10 users and some services to get Copilot into an organization quickly. So that's a promotion that we'll be looking to run with a fixed price, fixed outcome. And you'll see us share that with you shortly. We'd encourage you to ask some of you and share with your colleagues to sign up for webinars 1 and 2. We will look to rerun these, but obviously webinar 3 is where our focus will start to move to. For organisations that are at a point to get started, we are running executive workshops in terms of AI readiness. So helping you find use cases or problem statements where AI might be appropriate to use, and helping you prioritize those, as well as understanding the return on investment of putting AI to work for you. And for organizations that are really advanced at this stage, we've got our Deeper AI Lab, where we can come and help you build use cases with the development team. And we've got environments to test and learn, which can be shared with you to go through a build cycle and deployment of AI in action. So there's a couple of actions that you can take and engage with us on. I think
just want to just in terms of the summary, then, just in terms of for your next steps. I hope you found that useful. Really focus on ideas. Look at assets in terms of what you've got internally. So what ideas have you got internally? What assets have you got in terms of data? What information is available to you? What kind of capabilities have you got internal within your organization? Are you a very strong tech site? Are you not? And then I think those things will start to get you towards starting points. Okay. Consider those potential. This SORT model hopefully lets you consider some internal use cases. We can help, as Chris was talking about, some of the ideation process if you want to work through and filter some of those pieces. What we would say is no Death Star projects. All right, don't go down the route of, well, I've got this massive idea, something that's going to take about a year and will probably be disappointing. Think small and agile, something that's going to get you some quick wins, get you some runs on the board, that's going to make you meet the needs of the little candidate projects that you settle on to start with.
We've seen success come where people are thinking in the region of something that can be delivered, and I'm careful to say a minimum viable product. So I don't particularly like the term within a 30 to 90-day period. That's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
For these things.
We don't want it to take too long, and as a result of that, look at your current vendor offerings. All right. So if it could be you've got an existing relationship, like the guy from Priceline said, look, all our data is sitting out there on Google. So maybe start with Google, right? So if you've got an existing strong relationship with a specific vendor, that might be a good place to start. Or if you're looking for something new or niche, well, then maybe you have to take a bit of a step back, and we can probably help you with some vendor selection and some other bits there if that's helpful. Either way, keep the scale small and the scope tight, and make sure you can measure the value. So when you get to the end of it, you want to be able to demonstrate what you've actually achieved, and if you can do that in currency, that usually helps with the next phase of your business process.
We've got some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. So I haven't seen any of those. I've been busy on here.
Yeah. So one I think we could probably have predicted. Steve, are you going to open this up for voice conversation now, or is there?
Yeah. People can unmute themselves, I think. So I've just put up a final Mentimeter, which we can do kind of as we go. Yep. Let's focus on that question. So Cedric put a question in the chat. Cedric, I don't know if you want to come on mic, or you're happy for me to read it. Little noise. Okay, let's. So, hold on, why is it not? There we go. So Cedric says, purely curious, and of course, out of scope of the content here, but what are the initial thoughts on DeepSeek? Yes, as you say, it was almost inevitable that it was going to come up.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? In that, the US announced Stargate, was it last week, in terms of just after Trump's inauguration and spending 500 billion, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of future investment, and then being upset by the Chinese.
It made me think about that old story, which is probably not even true, about the Americans spending a fortune developing a pen that could write in space, and the Russians taking a pencil. Yeah. And a similar kind of approach. Probably not true, but interesting. When you look at this, you think, well, obviously, I like the fact that they quote the Sputnik moment. I think that what's really interesting, I think, is that you've got a situation there where restricting the access to hardware and the latest and greatest hardware has forced people to think in a different way. And they're actually being forced to go down and work in a much more cooperative way.
Sure.
To look at different ways of solving the problem rather than just throwing more hardware at it. And I think it's really interesting. I would be interested to see what the DeepSeek looks like if you do put it on the latest hardware. How quickly it can learn and how quickly those things move up.
I think what's interesting from this, and you're absolutely right in terms of restricting access to those NVIDIA super chips, effectively, GPUs. These models that we're working with, so the foundational models that are out there in the market today from OpenAI. So that one, obviously Meta with its Llama 3.5, and so Google Gemini as well. There's a forecast that these are costing somewhere in the region of around $100 million to train each time, and it's getting more and more expensive to train these foundational models. I think the learning from this is that Meta and Llama is an open source model, and there's a belief that the Chinese have taken that open source model, which is a perfectly acceptable thing to do, and to build on that and to utilize that. And obviously the proof will come out in the next few weeks as people start to look behind the scenes at how have they achieved this, because the estimation is this has cost, or the announcement was this cost 6 million to train, considerably less, and as you said, on lesser hardware. What does it mean for the markets? Well, it actually means Europe, the UK, and other markets can get involved in developing models at a far cheaper rate, even with this restriction around the GPUs. So AI, in theory, in the future, is going to become a lot more cost-effective to build and deploy. And we're already seeing this. So some examples I mentioned earlier when we were talking, a lot of organizations are now starting to move. When I say organizations, I'm talking about the tech business. How do we monetize AI? Two initiatives that came out just over Christmas into New Year, Microsoft and Google, with their Microsoft Office 365 and also Google Workspace, have announced that they've included Gemini with Workspace and Copilot with 365 as part of the standard subscription now. Now, it's not the super version, it's not the full version of Copilot, but they're now making that available with a slight price increase to all users. So all of a sudden, this is available at the business desktop for Google and for Microsoft customers. So we're making this more accessible without a shadow of a doubt in organizations. And for example, Google raised their price by $2. So they went from $12 to just under $14, but that's suddenly given them exposure to a whole new customer base that weren't necessarily going to adopt that solution. So I think we're going to see some interesting changes in 2025. DeepSeek's one of them.
I found it's always interesting when something comes on the mainstream news that you know a lot about, and you see how it's reported, isn't it? It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. When your subject comes on, and you see how things get dumbed down to a certain point, to an extent, and just focused on the hype. So everybody was looking at this much money was wiped off share prices, and this much, but in reality, what changed? The people are downloading a free tool, which they're probably just curious, they're clearly curious about, which is a bit of a game changer in terms of how those models are applied. But when we've talked about this previously about selecting a model, quite often you're not really looking for the biggest and the best and the fastest. You're looking for something that's niche, that actually meets your need. Quite often it might be something you want to run locally, or it might be based on just a subset of information that you're using a kind of RAG configuration.
Yeah, it's clean product information. You don't need the largest model, right? We expect to see more small language models appear, which either run. So Apple announced with their latest phones, the 16, that was going to have a small language model deployed to it so that we could become more productive on the phone locally. Yeah. You can also use these inside the enterprise. They don't have to be small, but when we're talking about small, it may be 3 billion parameters versus 50 billion parameters, but it will do an efficient job for you. You don't need Llama 3.5 or Gemini 1.5 going to version 2 to be successful with AI.
Well, often as well, if you, I mean, certainly when we were talking about edge analytics, you want tools and services that are actually available out at the point where the decision needs to be made. Think about automated vehicles. You can't really depend on a cloud connection in order to make a decision. Right?
No, it needs to run disconnected.
It's got to be running locally. It's got to be based on a subset of information. So I think this is another area where I think that we've seen a completely different approach, which again might resonate back into the way some of these models are deployed. Is it going to mean that we can build a lot of these models and capability for less? Well, probably, yeah. It does mean we can put those out. But I'd be really interested to see whether or not we can downscale some of these things and use some of these smaller models in a bit of a more niche application set. But it was quite interesting watching Trumpy spitting feathers. That was quite good. I like that.
Yeah. So the DeepSeek model was put on Hugging Face.
Yeah.
And obviously that's been downloaded and the app has been put into the Google App Store and the iOS App Store and went to #1 by last night. I think there were some challenges for them in terms of volume of signups, but that's not unusual. We see those kind of things when spikes occur in terms of tech taking off or solutions taking off. I think the important aspect of this is it has upset certain tech vendors. However, their share price, interestingly, has come back. So if you look at
what's happened to Nvidia, though,
Nvidia lost 560 billion overnight, so it's trading something like $15 to $20 down. And
I remember that used to be a lot of money, but I guess
there's a view that they were overpriced
I think so,
and overinflated anyhow. But if you look at Amazon, if you look at Google, Google's slightly down, but Amazon isn't, Microsoft isn't, and IBM is up. So, the major players, they've recovered from what was Monday's bloodbath. And people are looking at this from a slightly more mature perspective.
So Cedric, thanks for the question. We did enjoy talking about it. I'm not sure we gave you some of our views, but I think everybody's in the same boat really. It's an interesting change, and it is I think quite nice to see that we're not just on this trajectory where these key vendors can throw as much money as they can, and everybody else is going to be elbowed out. I think it was quite nice to see a few chinks in that chinks of daylight that mean that it's opening that door to other people.
I think one last point, Neil, on that is we go back to data. Where does your data live?
Yeah.
Who do you trust? And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't trust DeepSeek, but obviously some of the early tests were people were putting in chat requests of tell me about Tiananmen Square. And it said, I have no knowledge of this. So it's about the ethics, the guidelines, the guardrails, those kind of things with the models.
Yeah.
And back to who do you trust for your enterprise data?
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind.
Another plug for webinar one, because we did talk about some of those pieces in there. Have we got any more questions, Stephen? Have we got any other areas?
Cedric's observation just above that was about retraining models, and you're retraining models on data that's already been generated by AI. Yeah. Does hallucination does it kind of go out of control? How can you trust it?
Yeah, it's a good use case. I mean, one of the things we've found where what we've seen is that people are generally kind of running out of data to train these kind of models on, and actually sometimes cybersecurity is a good example of this, where you might generate a whole series of events using your AI tools in order to train your model in terms of what threats to look for. There is not going to be enough real data of what a threat looks like. You want to generate things in terms, and the tools can be really useful for doing that. So again, quite a nice, ethical, well-defined use case of generating those kind of patterns. When you get into doing things that are based on, let's say, artistic content or prose or people's opinions or anything that's written, that's where it starts to get a little bit sticky. If you're generating things based on reviews that are not validated, or where that information's come, and then you're using that to generate other things that look like it, which you can then use to retrain your model, that's where you start to get into you can be compounding the risk of hallucination in those cases. So there's good use cases for using AI generated content to train your model, because sometimes it's just not available, just doesn't exist. But again, if you can be quite sure that the stuff you're generating is realistic and factual and contextual, then fine. When you're starting doing opinions based on opinions and then using AI to drive those things, that's where it starts to get into a bit of a doom loop.
And it's a question of trust from whose point of view, right? In terms of, is that answer factually correct? And from whose perspective is it factually correct? We're talking about leveraging this for the enterprise now. And so obviously within your organization, you have professional people who produce professional content, and that's your view as a business and your secret sauce, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about leveraging here. One of the things you'll see this year, and obviously this R1 model is part of it, is reasoning. So the focus is to reduce hallucinations, so trust is increased, and having more think time within these models. So the reasoning behind it is providing higher accuracy of answers. And as we step forward, I think you will see that improve. Humans do make mistakes. So again, we hallucinate, but we're not as conscious of thinking about that. But these models will improve over time, and the reasoning aspect and building memory so that they can remember the conversation that you have. So the models at the moment don't have that. You prompt them and get a response, but having memory and state where they understand the conversations and discussions that have gone previously, that is what you'll start to see in these models moving forward. And they will also start to develop an understanding of the real world, which they don't have today. So, I think it's Ethan Mollick who said the average cat has got more intelligence than these models in terms of understanding the physical world.
We didn't see that from the Euro's prediction experiment.
My cats don't have intelligence.
Rubbish, but we will see. Again, another webinar one. Okay. Any other questions, Stephen? Anything else we want to cover?
Nothing, I don't think so. I think that's everything. Thank you ever so much for hanging around. Those of you who have, the recording will be sent around so you can enjoy it all over again at your leisure, maybe at 1.5 or 2 times speed. So I do appreciate you hanging around. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Chris. and thank you to everybody else who's